The moment I realized my own brother had been systematically destroying my life for years was the same moment I understood that the person who shares your blood can become the one who bleeds you dry without a single drop of remorse. I stood in my father's study 3 days after his funeral, holding documents that revealed a betrayal so deep, so calculated, that I actually laughed out loud before the tears came. Tyler, my older brother, the boy who taught me to ride a bike, who threatened any kid who bullied me in school, who walked me down the aisle when our father was too sick to do it himself, had been stealing from our family for over a decade. He had forged signatures, manipulated our dying father, and orchestrated a plan to leave me with nothing while positioning himself as the devoted son. My name is Emma Reynolds, and this is the story of how my brother turned into my worst enemy, and how I made certain he faced every consequence he so carefully tried to avoid. Growing up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Tyler and I were inseparable. He was 3 years older than me, which meant he was always ahead, always the one blazing trails for me to follow. Our father, David Reynolds, owned a successful HV company that he had built from nothing. He started as a single technician with a used van and a dream, and by the time Tyler and I were teenagers, Reynolds Heating and Cooling employed over 50 people and served 3 counties. Our mother, Margaret, stayed home to raise us, creating a household that felt warm and safe and full of love. Tyler was always the golden child, the firstborn son who could do no wrong. He was charming in a way that made everyone want to be around him, teachers and coaches and neighbors alike falling under his spell. I never resented him for it because he was genuinely good to me back then. When I struggled with math, he stayed up late helping me study. When I got my heart broken by my first boyfriend, he showed up at my dorm room with ice cream and bad movies. He was my protector, my confidant, my best friend. But there was always something underneath the charm that I refused to see. Tyler never quite lived up to his potential. He dropped out of college after 2 years, claiming he was going to learn the family business from the ground up. Our father was thrilled, believing his son would one day take over Reynolds Heating and Cooling. But Tyler never seemed interested in the actual work. He wanted the title, the respect, the money, without putting in the hours that our father had sacrificed to build something real. I took a different path. I went to Penn State for business administration, then got my MBA from Carnegie Mellon while working full-time. I met my husband Nathan during my graduate program. He was in law school, brilliant and kind, with a quiet strength that balanced my sometimes chaotic energy. We got married when I was 26, and I joined my father's company as the director of operations, determined to help modernize the business and ensure its future. Tyler resented me for it. I see that now, though I was blind to it at the time. Every achievement of mine was a reminder of his own failures. Every time our father praised my work, Tyler's smile would tighten almost imperceptibly. I told myself he was just stressed, that sibling rivalry was normal, that deep down he was proud of me. I made excuses for behavior that I should have questioned. The first sign that something was truly wrong came about 2 years before our father's death. Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease, and while he was still capable of running the business, he started thinking about retirement and succession planning. I assumed, perhaps naively, that Tyler and I would share responsibility for the company. I had the education and the operational experience, while Tyler had been in the field for years and knew the technical side. But Dad surprised us both. He sat us down one evening and explained that he had decided to name me as the primary successor, with Tyler serving as the head of field operations. The company would remain family-owned, but I would be the CEO when Dad stepped back. Tyler exploded. I had never seen him so angry, his face red and his hands shaking as he accused our father of favoritism, of humiliating him, of throwing away years of loyalty. He stormed out of the house and didn't speak to any of us for 3 weeks. When he finally came back, he was different. The charm was still there, but it felt hollow now, like a mask he was wearing. He apologized to Dad, said he understood the decision, even hugged me and told me he was proud of his little sister. I was so relieved that the conflict was over that I ignored the coldness in his eyes. That was my mistake. I should have known that Tyler never forgave and never forgot. He was just waiting for his moment. Our father's health declined faster than anyone expected. The Parkinson's progressed aggressively, and within 18 months, Dad could barely sign his own name. He was confined to a hospital bed in his own home, with round-the-clock care that cost a fortune but was worth every penny. I visited every day after work, reading to him, updating him on the business, just sitting with him when words became too difficult. Tyler visited too, though his visits were different. He would close the door to Dad's room and stay for hours, emerging with a satisfied expression that made me uncomfortable. I told myself he was spending quality time with our dying father. I told myself I should be grateful he was there at all. What I didn't know was that Tyler was using those visits to manipulate our father. He would wait until Dad was exhausted, confused, barely conscious from the medication, and then he would produce documents for signature. He convinced Dad that he was signing routine business paperwork, tax forms, insurance documents. In reality, Tyler was slowly, methodically transferring assets out of the family trust and into his own name. Our father died on a rainy Tuesday in October, surrounded by his family. I held his hand as he took his last breath, and I genuinely believed that Tyler was crying real tears beside me. The funeral was beautiful, packed with employees and customers and friends who had loved David Reynolds. Tyler gave a moving eulogy that had everyone in tears, talking about our father's integrity, his dedication to family, his legacy of honest hard work. The hypocrisy of those words would become clear to me soon enough. 3 days after the funeral, I went to our father's study to begin the difficult process of sorting through his papers. Nathan offered to come with me, but I wanted to do this alone, to feel close to Dad one last time in the room where he had taught me about business and life. I started with the desk drawers, finding old photographs and handwritten notes, the detritus of a long and meaningful life. Then I found the documents. They were in a folder labeled Tyler Personal, tucked away in the bottom drawer beneath a stack of old tax returns. My first thought was that I shouldn't look, that it was none of my business, but something made me open that folder, some instinct that had been screaming at me for months while I stubbornly refused to listen. The first document was a deed transfer for our family's vacation cabin in the Poconos, a property that had been in the Reynolds family for 3 generations. It had been signed over to Tyler 6 months ago, with our father's shaky signature at the bottom. The second document was a withdrawal authorization from the family trust, redirecting $300,000 into an account I didn't recognize. The third was a revised will, dated just 2 weeks before Dad's death, leaving Tyler the majority share of Reynolds' heating and cooling, while reducing my inheritance to a small percentage. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the papers. This couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Dad had changed his mind, decided that Tyler deserved more after all. Maybe I was the one being unreasonable, expecting too much. But then I looked more closely at the signatures. They were all wrong. Our father had beautiful handwriting, precise and controlled, even as his health declined. These signatures were wobbly and uncertain, clearly produced by a hand that could barely grip a pen, and the dates on the documents corresponded exactly with Tyler's long private visits to Dad's sick room. He had done this deliberately. He had waited until our father was at his most vulnerable, drugged and confused and dying, and he had stolen from him. He had stolen from me. He had betrayed the man who had given him everything, the brother who had loved him without question. I don't remember how I got home that night. Nathan said I walked through the door white as a ghost, clutching the folder to my chest like it was the only thing keeping me upright. When I finally managed to explain what I had found, his face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, anger, and finally the cold determination of a lawyer who had just been given the case of his life. "We need to be strategic about this," Nathan said. "Tyler doesn't know you found those documents. We need to gather more evidence before we confront him." I wanted to drive to Tyler's house that very night and scream at him until my voice gave out. I wanted to call our mother and show her what her golden son had really been doing. I wanted justice, immediate and absolute and satisfying. But Nathan was right. Tyler had spent years constructing his lies. If we moved too quickly, he would find a way to spin it, to make me look like the bitter sister trying to steal her brother's rightful inheritance. I needed proof that would leave no room for doubt. The next morning I called Megan Torres. We had been friends since elementary school, and she had recently started working as a private investigator after a career as a police officer. I trusted her completely, and more importantly, she was very, very good at her job. I need you to look into my brother, I told her over the phone. I think he's been stealing from our family for years. Megan didn't hesitate. Tell me everything. I spent the next 3 hours in her office, laying out what I had discovered and what I suspected. Megan took careful notes, asked probing questions, and by the end of our meeting had already outlined a plan for investigation. She would trace the money that had been diverted from the family trust. She would examine the property transfers and look for signs of fraud. She would interview the caregivers who had been present during Tyler's visits to our father. This is going to take time, she warned me. If your brother is as careful as you think he is, he won't have left obvious tracks. Take whatever time you need, I said. I want to destroy him. The words came out harder than I expected, and I saw something flicker in Megan's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern, but she just nodded and got to work. While Megan investigated, I had to maintain the facade of normalcy. This was the hardest part. I had to see Tyler at family dinners and business meetings, had to smile and make small talk and pretend that I didn't know what he had done. Every time he hugged me, I wanted to recoil. Every time he mentioned our father with that false note of grief in his voice, I wanted to expose him right there. But I kept my composure. I played the role of the grieving daughter, the supportive sister, the dutiful heir to a family business. And all the while, I was watching Tyler more carefully than I ever had before. What I saw disturbed me deeply. Tyler had always been charming, but now I could see the calculation behind every smile. He was systematically ingratiating himself with our mother, visiting her daily, bringing her flowers and groceries, positioning himself as the devoted son while I was busy with work and the investigation. He was also making moves at the company, quietly suggesting that certain changes needed to be made, that perhaps the succession plan our father had outlined needed to be revisited. He was trying to push me out, not overtly, not in any way that could be challenged directly, but through 1,000 small underminations. He would miss meetings and then claim I had never informed him. He would make promises to clients that I had explicitly rejected, then act confused when I had to clean up his messes. He would talk to employees about how stressed I seemed, how maybe the pressure of running the company was too much for me. I documented everything, every contradictory statement, every suspicious absence, every attempt to sabotage my authority. Nathan helped me create a secure digital record that Tyler couldn't access, and we added to it daily. 2 months into the investigation, Megan called me with news that made my blood run cold. "The money trail is worse than you thought," she said. "Those transfers you found in the folder were just the tip of the iceberg. Tyler has been siphoning money from the company for at least 8 years. He set up shell companies to invoice for services that were never provided. He took kickbacks from vendors in exchange for contracts. And he's been skimming from the employee pension fund. 8 years. My brother had been stealing from our family for nearly a decade, and no one had noticed because we all trusted him, because he was charming, because he was Tyler." "How much?" I managed to ask. "At this point, I'm estimating around $2 million total, but I'm still finding new accounts, new shell companies. The real number could be higher." $2 million. Enough to bankrupt the company if it came out wrong. Enough to destroy our employees' retirement security. Enough to prove that Tyler had never cared about our father's legacy at all, only about what he could take from it. I asked Megan about the documents I had found in Dad's study. She had been working with a handwriting expert and a forensic document examiner to analyze the signatures. "They're fraudulent," she confirmed. "The signatures on those documents don't match your father's handwriting from when he was healthy. They were clearly obtained under duress, probably when he was too sick to understand what he was signing. In legal terms, this is textbook fraud and possibly elder abuse. Elder abuse. My brother had committed elder abuse against our dying father, the man who had raised him, provided for him, loved him unconditionally despite all his failures. Tyler had taken advantage of that love in the cruelest possible way. I hung up the phone and sat in my car for an hour, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I dried my eyes, took a deep breath, and started planning my revenge. The first step was securing my position at the company. Tyler's revised will would be challenged in court, but that process could take months or years, and in the meantime, he might try to use the documents to force me out. I needed to make sure that couldn't happen. Nathan helped me prepare a motion to contest the will based on fraud and undue influence. We included the forensic analysis of the signatures, the evidence of Tyler's financial crimes, and testimony from Dad's caregivers confirming that he had been incapable of making legal decisions during the time the documents were allegedly signed. The judge granted a temporary injunction preventing any changes to company ownership until the case could be decided. Tyler was served with the papers at the office, in front of a dozen employees. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about his reaction later. Shock, then rage, then a frantic phone call to a lawyer. He had clearly expected to get away with it, to slide into control of the company, while I was still reeling from Dad's death. The injunction was the first sign that his carefully laid plans were falling apart. He called me that night, and I let it go to voicemail. His message was a masterpiece of manipulation, confused, hurt, claiming he had no idea what I was talking about, begging me to call him back so we could work this out as a family. I saved the voicemail as evidence and didn't respond. The next morning I called a meeting of all company employees. I stood in the warehouse where my father had started his business 30 years ago, surrounded by the people who had helped him build something meaningful, and I told them the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. I explained that there were serious concerns about financial irregularities that were being investigated. I assured them that their jobs were secure, that the company would survive, that I would protect them the way my father always had. When I finished speaking, several of the older employees came up to shake my hand. "We always knew Tyler wasn't right," one of them told me quietly. "Your father was too loyal to see it, but we saw it." It turned out that Tyler wasn't as clever as he thought. Once people started looking, the evidence of his crimes was everywhere. Employees came forward with stories of suspicious behavior, of invoices they had questioned and been told to ignore, of conversations they had overheard. The shell companies he had created were traced back to him through corporate registration records. The kickbacks were documented in emails he had been too arrogant to delete. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source: Tyler's wife. I had never been close to Sandra. She was quiet and reserved, seemingly content to exist in Tyler's shadow. I assumed she was complicit in whatever he was doing, another piece of his carefully constructed life. But 2 weeks after I filed the will contest, she called me and asked to meet in secret. We met at a coffee shop in a town 30 miles away, somewhere neither of us would be recognized. Sandra looked terrible, thin and pale and nervous, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. "I know what Tyler did," she said without preamble. "I've known for years. I was too afraid to say anything because he threatened me, told me he would destroy me if I ever talked, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after what he did to your father." Sandra had documents that Megan hadn't been able to find. Bank statements, tax records, correspondence with the accountants who had helped Tyler hide his crimes. She had been secretly copying files for years, building a record that she hoped would protect her if everything fell apart. "Why now?" I asked her. "Why are you coming to me?" Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "Because I watched him with your father in those last weeks. I saw how he would wait until your dad was barely conscious, how he would put the pen in his hand and guide it across the paper. I saw the look on Tyler's face when he did it. He enjoyed it. He actually enjoyed taking from a dying man." She paused, struggling to compose herself. "I have 2 children with him," she continued. "I thought I was protecting them by staying quiet. But what kind of mother am I if I let them grow up thinking this is okay? What kind of person am I? I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're doing the right thing now. That's what matters." Sandra's documents filled in the remaining gaps in the investigation. With her testimony and the evidence she provided, the case against Tyler became airtight. Nathan worked with the district attorney's office to prepare criminal charges: fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, forgery. Megan coordinated with forensic accountants to calculate the full extent of the theft, and I made sure that our mother heard the truth from me before it became public. That conversation with Mom was one of the hardest of my life. She didn't want to believe it, kept insisting that there must be a mistake, that Tyler would never do something like this. I showed her the documents, the forensic analysis, the bank records. I played her recordings of Tyler lying about his whereabouts, his activities, his entire life. And slowly, painfully, I watched understanding dawn on her face. "I failed him," she said finally, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I made excuses for him his whole life. I let him believe he could get away with anything because he was my son. This isn't your fault," I told her, though part of me wondered if that was entirely true. Tyler made his own choices. He's the only one responsible for what he did. Mom nodded, but I could see that she didn't fully believe me. She would carry this guilt for the rest of her life, the knowledge that she had enabled a monster. The day Tyler was arrested, I was at the office. Megan had coordinated with the police to time the arrest for maximum impact. Right in the middle of a company meeting, in front of employees and clients and everyone Tyler had spent years impressing with his charm. 2 officers walked in, asked Tyler to step outside, and when he refused, they informed him that he was under arrest for multiple felonies, including elder abuse. I watched through the conference room window as they put him in handcuffs. He was shouting, protesting his innocence, trying to maintain the facade of the wrongfully accused victim. But his eyes found mine through the glass, and what I saw there was pure hatred. Not shame, not regret, not even fear, just rage at being caught, at having his carefully constructed lies exposed. I felt nothing. I had expected triumph, satisfaction, some sense of justice finally being served. Instead, I just felt empty. This was my brother, the boy who had taught me to ride a bike, who had walked me down the aisle, who I had loved for 32 years, and he was being led away in handcuffs because he had tried to destroy me. The trial took place 8 months later. Tyler pleaded not guilty to all charges, maintaining until the very end that he was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by his jealous sister. His defense attorney tried to paint me as a controlling, power-hungry woman who had manipulated our father into cutting Tyler out of the will. He called witnesses who testified to Tyler's good character, his dedication to the family, his grief over losing his father. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented document after document proving Tyler's fraud. They brought in the forensic experts who had analyzed Dad's signatures. They called the caregivers who had witnessed Tyler's manipulation of our dying father. And most devastatingly, they called Sandra, who described in heartbreaking detail how her husband had bragged about stealing from his own family. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Tyler guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, I submitted a victim impact statement. I talked about what Tyler had taken from me. Not just money, but my trust, my sense of family, my belief that the people closest to you would never hurt you. I talked about our father, about the legacy he had worked so hard to build, about how Tyler had desecrated that legacy for personal gain. And I talked about the employees whose pension funds Tyler had raided, people who had worked for our family for decades and now faced uncertain retirements because of his greed. Tyler was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge called his crimes a profound betrayal of family trust and an abuse of the most sacred relationship a person can have with their parent. He ordered full restitution of all stolen funds, which meant that Tyler's assets were seized and liquidated to repay what he had taken. I was there when they led him out of the courtroom. He passed within a few feet of me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. He stopped for just a moment, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw something I had never seen in my brother before. Fear. Not for himself, I don't think, but for his legacy. He was realizing finally that he would be remembered as a thief and a fraud, that our father's name would forever be associated with his crimes. "You destroyed this family," he hissed at me. I shook my head slowly. "No, Tyler, you did. I just made sure you paid for it." They took him away and I never saw him again. The aftermath was long and painful. The company nearly went bankrupt from the financial damage Tyler had caused, but we managed to save it through a combination of cost-cutting, new investment, and sheer determination. The employees who had trusted our family for decades rallied around me, working harder than ever to keep the business afloat. Our father's legacy survived, though it would take years to fully recover. Sandra divorced Tyler while he was awaiting trial. She received full custody of their children, whom I made a point of staying in contact with. They were innocent victims of their father's crimes, and I wanted them to know that they still had family who loved them. Sandra eventually remarried and moved to another state, but we still talk occasionally. She says she's finally learning to forgive herself for staying quiet so long. Mom never fully recovered from the revelation of Tyler's betrayal. She sold the family home and moved to a smaller place closer to me, but there was a sadness in her eyes that never went away. She visited Tyler in prison once, early in his sentence, and came back devastated. "He's not sorry," she told me. "He still thinks he was justified. He still blames everyone but himself." She stopped visiting after that. I don't know if Tyler noticed or cared. Nathan and I had our first child 2 years after the trial, a daughter we named after my father, Davina. Holding her for the first time, I thought about the future she would have, the legacy she would inherit, the company that my father had built, that my brother had tried to destroy, that I had fought to save. It was hers now, and I would protect it with everything I had. Sometimes I think about what might have been if Tyler had been honest, if he had been willing to work alongside me instead of trying to push me out, if he had been able to accept that our father's love wasn't a zero-sum game, that there was enough for both of us. We could have built something together, expanded the business, made our father proud in a way that neither of us could have alone. But Tyler chose a different path. He chose greed over family, deception over honesty, destruction over creation, and he paid the price for those choices. The hardest thing to accept is that I will never get my brother back, not just because he's in prison, but because the brother I thought I had never really existed. He was a construction, a carefully maintained facade designed to hide the rot underneath. The Tyler who taught me to ride a bike, who held me when I cried, who walked me down the aisle. The Tyler was already gone long before I discovered his crimes. Maybe he never existed at all. I've learned to make peace with that. It took years of therapy, countless conversations with Nathan, and many sleepless nights. But I eventually understood that my grief wasn't for Tyler as he was, but for Tyler as I wanted him to be. I was mourning a fantasy, an idealized version of my brother that existed only in my mind. The real Tyler was capable of stealing from his dying father. The real Tyler was capable of trying to destroy his sister's life. The real Tyler was capable of looking me in the eyes and lying with a smile on his face. That's who he always was, and I was simply too naive to see it. People often ask me if I regret pursuing the charges against him. Wouldn't it have been easier to settle quietly to keep the family's shame private? Didn't I worry about what his children would think, growing up with a father in prison? I did worry about those things, and still do. But I knew that letting Tyler escape consequences would send a message to everyone who knew our story, that if you're charming enough, wealthy enough, connected enough, you can get away with anything. That family loyalty means protecting even the most heinous betrayals. That the victims of fraud and manipulation should stay quiet for the sake of appearances. I refused to send that message. What Tyler did was wrong, and he deserved to face the consequences. Not because I wanted revenge, though I won't pretend that wasn't part of it, but because justice matters, because the truth matters, because the employees whose pensions he stole, the father whose trust he abused, the sister whose life he tried to destroy, we all deserve to see him held accountable. Tyler was released from prison last year, after serving 8 years of his 12-year sentence. I know because the victim notification system informed me, as it's required to do. I don't know where he went or what he's doing now. I don't want to know. That chapter of my life is closed, and I have no intention of reopening it. But I do know this: karma is real, not in some mystical sense, but in the practical reality that our choices have consequences. Tyler spent decades making choices that prioritized his own greed over everyone else's well-being. Now he's approaching 60, a convicted felon with no assets, no family connections, and no prospects. The charm that used to open every door for him is useless in a world that knows the truth about who he really is. Meanwhile, I am sitting in the office that my father built, running the company that he trusted me to protect. My husband is picking up our daughter from school. My mother is having tea with friends who have supported her through the worst years of her life. The employees who bet on me when everything seemed lost are receiving the pensions they earned, fully restored with interest. And somewhere out there, Tyler is learning what it means to face the consequences of betraying everyone who ever loved him. I don't gloat about it. There's no satisfaction in watching someone destroy themselves, even someone who tried to destroy you. But I also don't feel guilty about the role I played in his downfall. He made his choices, I made mine. And in the end, the truth was revealed, justice was served, and the right side won. That's my story. The story of how my brother turned into my worst enemy, and how I made sure that the betrayal he thought would benefit him became the very thing that destroyed him. It's not a happy story, not exactly. There's no fairy tale ending where everyone reconciles and lives happily ever after. Some wounds don't heal, and some relationships can't be repaired. But there is something else, something that took me years to recognize and appreciate. There is strength. There is integrity. There is the knowledge that when I was tested, I didn't compromise my principles or abandon the people who depended on me. Tyler thought he could break me, and he was wrong. I am Emma Reynolds. I am a daughter who honored her father's legacy. I am a sister who refused to accept betrayal as the price of family peace. I am a business owner who protected her employees from a predator. And I am a survivor who built a beautiful life in spite of everything that was done to tear it down. Tyler took so much from me: my trust, my innocence, my belief in the sanctity of family bonds. But he couldn't take my courage, my determination, or my commitment to truth. Those are mine, and they always will be. If you're listening to this and you're facing something similar, a family member who has betrayed you, a loved one who has become your enemy, I want you to know that you're not alone. It happens more often than anyone wants to admit, and the pain is indescribable. But you can survive it. You can fight back. You can make sure that the people who hurt you face the consequences they deserve. Don't stay silent for the sake of family peace. Don't protect someone who is actively trying to destroy you. Don't let shame or fear or misplaced loyalty keep you from seeking justice. You deserve better than that. We all do. Tyler thought he was smarter than everyone else. He thought his charm would protect him forever. He thought he could take whatever he wanted without ever paying the price. He was wrong about all of it, and now he has the rest of his life to think about exactly how wrong he was. That's how my brother turned into my worst enemy. That's how I made sure he faced the consequences of his betrayal. And that's how I finally found peace. Not by forgiving him, but by accepting that some people are simply beyond redemption, and protecting yourself from them isn't a failure of love. It's a triumph of self-respect. My name is Emma Reynolds, and I'm no longer a victim. I am a survivor, a fighter, and a woman who refused to let betrayal define her life. Tyler tried to steal my future. He failed, and that is the only ending this story needs.